Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. In this session, I will be talking about the document intelligence challenges I see across financial services industry and some possible solutions that we can leverage on from SaaS Vaya. Let me start by briefly walk through what we'll cover today and how the session is structured. So I will briefly introduce my background, and then we will move into the business background and the current challenges from the documentation intelligence analysis for banking and the insurance industry. I will talk about some possible solutions that we can leverage from the SaaS Vaya. I will follow up with a practical kind of insurance use case to show a solution kind of that I built using SaaS Vaya. And then I will recap kind of why I think SaaS Vaya is a strong fit for this business problem. And then I will wrap up my presentation by sharing the kind of future state or next steps for this document intelligence solution. And then I will leave time for Q&A session. So before diving into the business problem, I will kind of briefly share my background. I'm currently working in the actuarial consulting at RSM US, and I'm a power user of SaaS. I have been using SaaS for 19 years. I started from the academic research, and then across different industries, I just keep using SaaS. For example, I use SaaS for transportation, commercial banks, insurance companies, and consulting firms. And most of the time, I use SaaS for, at the very beginning, kind of data analysis, statistical modeling, forecasting, and then the actuarial modeling, we use SaaS to do the projections. And I spent most recent years exploring the advanced AI-driven solutions too, including the AI agent, So with this context, I would like to directly move into talking about the business challenges that I observed across insurance and banking industry that's related to model validation, internal audit. So while I was working on model risk governance, including the first-line model validation and also the third-line internal audit support, I've validated a wide range of models, like I mentioned, like actuarial models, underwriting models, pricing models, and some others. A key part of the model validation, including we need to make sure the model data inputs and model assumption inputs, they need to be aligned from their original source. And those sources, a lot of time, are stored or documented in plain documents as PDFs or email approvals. And one example is for example, the insurance policy contract, or we have regulatory filing memos. Those are in PDFs, and also claim notes. We can review heavily, multiple PDFs for claim notes, and some other model change approvals can be documented in email chains. And sometimes these documents could be unstructured. For example, for PDFs, can be searchable PDFs, which is slightly easier for us to review or to search information. But sometimes we can have unsearchable PDFs, which is scanned formats. And I heard from my prior clients, some of the policy contract can be scanned upside down, in different type of formats. And for insurance company, for different products, their kind of a contract format and the contents benefit coverage included can all kind of share kind of different formats across different line of business, different type of products. So those will increase our review time. And also kind of it's a little bit hard for us to scale. So on top of that, relates to the kind of audit, external audit, internal audit requirement, and from the regulators' requirement, we also need to do a very good documentation for the review evidence. And then for this part, I don't know if you have the experience, sometimes we need to take a screenshot from the regulatory and then put them side by side. For the model input, okay, it's the left-hand side, and then for the regulatory, it's the right-hand side, and we put the two screenshots side by side. But this, we are entering the AI era, so kind of this traditional documenting evidence documentation process also need to be modernized. So if we step back, many of these pain points trace back to a single kind of root cause. We call it like the document bottleneck. So here, what I want to mention is the biggest potential risk, or the biggest risk could be the error, the human error from the manual human review. Because from model risk governance perspective, kind of we need to make sure kind of we try to avoid this type of like human errors. So the natural question becomes, how do we move from document-heavy workflows to something kind of more scalable? And then this is where SAS Viya's document intelligence come into solution, where kind of the pipeline can be very helpful kind of in solving this problem. So high level speaking, what we are trying to do here is we will start from the plain documents. For example, if it's a PDFs, and then we leverage on solutions or tools to extract the key information that we need, and then convert it into, the first step is convert it into a semi-structured text or data format. And then we will leverage on kind of the visualytic and analytics tools to convert the semi-structured text into the structured data so that we can further analyze those structured data for the downstream actions. For example, the downstream actions could be to use it as the input for modeling, and use as the input for our predictive modeling or machine learning to try to capture more insights from both the structured data and the unstructured kind of data we extract from the documents. Then let's talk about the different SAS Viya capabilities that can be involved and where to use each one. So here, as you can see, kind of I included 3 different type of tools or features that are available kind of in Viya or kind of from SAS that we can consider kind of to solve this problem. So the first one is the document analysis. This one kind of is a SAS OCR orchestration tool. It can be used to extract the information that we kind of customized or kind of we specified from the PDFs, and then turn it into a semi-structured or unstructured text format. And then the second one in red is the visual text analytics. This we call it VTA, and this will be the focus for today's session. And I also use it for my use case demonstration. So this tool will give out a kind of low-code visual kind of workflows within the SAS that can help us to convert semi-structured or unstructured text into structured field. And then I also list out the computer vision. So this one can be used in manufacturing or kind of health data analysis. For example, it's mainly used for classifying images or detect some special objects. So, and also another kind of benefit for CV computer vision is it can processing a high volume. For example, if we have like thousands of PDFs, that's what I learned we can probably try computer vision and the cloud environment to do that. But today's session, we will focus on the VTA here. So if we can get this one implemented well, the benefits can be extended beyond automation. Especially for what risk leaders can gain some efficiency from this implementation. So the key benefits I want to just quickly mention is one is the efficiency in model risk governance. This is for our internal risk leaders perspective, and also stronger traceability because a lot of time, as I mentioned before, we need to compare the current assumptions, the current versions of assumptions, or data input back to the original source, and sometimes the source can be many, many years ago, So leveraging on this technology, we can set up the systematic process to do the tracing and the comparison. So next step, we can walk through a practical insurance use case focused on policy feature extraction to be used for validation. So for this use case example, the purpose or the goal is to extract the key policy features from a synthetic term life insurance contract, and then turn the information into a structured data format so that we can use it to compare to the model input that I extracted from the actual models. This is like a simple demo for a whole cycle of the model validation for the input, for the model input. So here, what I want to show you is this is I leverage on the Gen AI and then created a synthetic life insurance policy contract. As you can see, we have a basic policyholder information, which highlighted in the red box, and we have some key benefit information. So here I list out the long-term care rider benefit and the death benefit. Those are traditional fields, features, policy features for term life insurance. And also we have the amount specified in the policy contract, and also the premiums. So those are the customized information that I need for this use case. So the first step, if you remember, we need to leverage on some type of OCR to extract the information from the PDF. So this synthetic PDF I created is a searchable one. So it's a slightly easier case. And then, so I leverage on two different mini tools or that we can use. The left-hand side is from the Microsoft Store. They have a fast OCR. So I just, because this is just an individual one page PDF information extraction. So I just try this a small tool. And the results is not bad. So this is all just, as you can see, the bottom part is the output. This is used as the upstream extraction through the MS fast OCR. And the right-hand side, I just test another add-in built in the Excel kind of to snip the highlighted kind of text information. And then the final results that I will put into the SAS VIA is kind of from the fast OCR kind of results. It looks like more kind of aligned to what I need. So I use this one as the starting point. And then the next step is the output from the fast OCR is a text file, TXT file. So as you can see, this is also the first time I kind of use the SAS VIA. And I loaded this text file to the SAS Data Explorer within the SAS VIA. So as you can see, the input is a text file, and the output format is the SAS dataset with the name fast OCR results. So this is just to give you a basic idea about how the data that I look like after I load it to the SAS. As you can see, this whole data set only have one column. And then this is, I consider it as a semi-structured. So for example, there are special symbols like the dot that I need to kind of clean up. And then there are subtitles, title rows that I don't need. I'm going to remove those. For example, the policy information, policy owner, those, the whole row will be removed. And another kind of a data format transformation I need to do is, for example, for the, which one? For the policy form, the name is kind of level term life insurance. So this is the field name and the field value currently are included in the same cell. And similar to this one is the policy term 20 years. So usually when we do the comparison, we need kind of to split the cell into two. One is the field name or policy feature name, and the other one is the policy feature number. So there are some like data transformation that we need to do. And here is what the VTA will be helping. So this is the core kind of piece for today's session. As you can see, this VTA give us a low-code kind of environment, workflows, and then it's very clearly labeled, so that the users, even for myself, the developer, if it's like another 2 months, I totally forgot what I have been building here, but because I have already added those notes or kind of comments, right, kind of for each step, it's very easy for me to, refresh my memory, kind of what data transformation I have been doing here. Yeah, and then so this is kind of the thing I want to say, kind of, although I have been coding in SAS for almost like 19 years, but if this low code and workflow kind of option can give me more efficiency and also kind of transparency, and also easy for other auditors or kind of reviewers to understand what I have been trying to do, I just think why not to give it a try. I remember kind of when I was preparing for this, I spent about like 6 or 7 hours, including my learning curve, because I'm new to this SAS VIA, although I used to use base SAS EG kind of for many, many years. Yeah, and I just want to mention kind of from the SAS steps, what I listed here is a subset of all those kind of visual tools or steps that we can choose. Yeah, it should cover kind of most of the data transformation needs that we need to use. So just briefly explain what what I have been built here. The top workflow is just load in the semi-structured text, and then I do the data cleaning and the transformation, and then I export the output into a CSV. And then the second workflow here is just I created another synthetic Excel file, and then which is kind of mimicking the model input from the actual models. And then as you can see, the second step, I just join those two data sets into one, and then I do a side-by-side comparison. So at the end, what I try to mention is I feel kind of because the workflows is kind of well structured here, and it also kind of another benefit is make the auditing documentation or kind of when we need to document the review evidence, it also make that work slightly easier and more clearly documented. Because I remember when I was working on the code reviews, a lot of time we need to kind of write some comments, kind of what this block of code is doing, right? Kind of, and using this type of option or layout, I think it can make our kind of code review work also easier. Yeah. So this page just want to show you the final outlook from this process that I built. The first column is just a matching or not matching indicator, right? And if they matched or not matched. And then the second and the third column is the policy feature values from the model input Excel. And then I joined to the number 4 column is the policy feature values extracted from the PDF, from the policy contract PDF. And as you can see, there could be some format mismatches, so the indicator is not matched. So this is simple use case demo. I consider it as a proof of concept so that we can show our clients or our team members, okay, using SaaS Viya. And then even for a new user to SaaS, I don't think it's that difficult for them to build a process flow like this. And then the larger potential benefit is starting from this simple use case, we can try to scale it, for example, to more PDF processing. Like if we have 50 or 100 PDFs that we need to do, if they can share kind of the common format like this one, then we can just build a process in SaaS Viya kind of to automate the comparison or validation process here. So here, kind of, I would like to recap or summarize something I think kind of SaaS Viya can do well for, kind of a banking or insurance companies, model validation or internal audit, or even kind of external audit. So I think kind of for a long time, I always consider SaaS as the end-to-end kind of solution for myself. I used to build a end-to-end solution kind of to calculate premium increase using SaaS. And so, kind of we can do everything in this one platform, just why not, kind of. So that's one benefit. And then because I have been spending most of my career in financial services industry, both insurance and banking. And as you know, kind of these two industries are highly regulated. And we have for US, we have US regulations. And then for international, we have, for example, for insurance, we have IFRS 17 and we have Solvency II. And for banking, we also, have the related kind of the regulations. So one benefit of using SaaS, and now kind of the next kind of a future stage of like SaaSwaya can help us guarantee kind of the controls. So I don't need to worry about, every time I run the model, if it will generate the reliable or the consistent results or not. I would like to talk a little bit on the build first scale. So I just attended the session before this one. And then the presenter shared kind of right now the financial criminals, they started to use AI kind of to scale the financial attacks. So, okay, that's make me think about, okay, we kind of, from us, we need to leverage on, kind of some high performance solutions or technologies to speed up, from our side so that we can be a little bit better prepared for, kind of the financial criminals for fraud type of thing. So, and the SaaS is good for this one. And I used to use the macros a lot. For kind of if we have a process that we need to use it or run it regularly. For example, every quarter, every month, if we need to do that, or we need to run the same process for multiple kind of products, then SaaSwaya is a good candidate for that one. And for the last piece, the integration friendly, when I was testing this document, the VTA, I realized the Python, we can also kind of include the Python code within the SaaSwaya. So I also tested kind of one Python package, but I didn't include here. So that's what I try to mention kind of can you still hear me? Okay, if kind of your company or your team has already built a kind of process in Python, kind of, it's very easy. We don't need to fully convert it into a SaaS code. We can directly put it here, kind of, and then they can run all together. So I included 2 pages of the future states here. So for this one, I have already covered it in terms of like financial document intelligence. So what we try to do is, because I think for the unstructured documents, there are also kind of useful or insightful information we can try to extract. But before, kind of traditionally, most of the time we leverage on structured data like Excel or SQL database data that we can use. So what I try to say is, if we can leverage on also the unstructured PDF files or kind of documents, and then if we can capture those information from this piece, we can improve or enhance the kind of the insights that will provide to the senior management for their decision making. So that's the key part, like I try to say from this page. So one example is 3 years ago, I participated in a SOA, it's a Society of Actuaries. They have a hackathon. And then the hackathon was predicting the tweets, the number of tweets based on kind of a bunch of like tweet text, the kind of data they provided. But my ranking kind of wasn't that high. It's 16 or 17 out of like 21, 22 teams. But I already know kind of what's the cause. The cause is, at that time, I didn't have the tool or the knowledge to analyze the text, the information, all those tweets. So and then I watched the winning strategy. They have some like tools or technology method to capture, analyze the tweets so that they put those insights captured from the text into their model. So I think that's a good like lesson kind of for myself. For this one kind of, I want to mention the agentic AI. I know kind of nowadays each industry, kind of every industry, not necessarily for financial services, are kind of spending, kind of are investing in AI kind of solutions, right? And myself, I'm also kind of working on some AI enablement working group. So the future state that I think about, like, so if I know SAS also has kind of, for example, in SAS Viya, last year I heard there's a SAS Copilot kind of features which can, generate the code for us directly within the SAS Viya. But I want to mention kind of we can leverage on the agentic AI layer to kind of automate the processes to kind of another level. And also kind of we can leverage on the agents like intelligence to help us capture the insights, the trending, or even outliers or alerts kind of for us based on, based on our guidance or kind of the prompts that we are going to feed in. Yeah, so that's kind of the future trending that I want to mention here. I think that's all of the topic that I want to share today. I will give time to Sarah.
Thank you, Megan. Does anyone have any questions for Megan today? Yes, sir.
Hello. I think what you built here is really interesting and potentially really valuable. There is a part of it that I was not sure whether I understood how you got it to work. Let's stay at this frame right here for a moment. It seems to me that when you have the OCR scan of the PDF, you're then feeding it into the system as a text file. You have identified how to separate the name of a field from the response or the data point in the field by figuring out what the delimiter is. Like, okay, there is a colon. We said here's the data point. Here's what the content is, and then you were able to divide columns that way. But I can see that your parallel flow is essentially giving a little bit of top-down information, right? You're saying, I know what the names of the fields are that I think I'm looking for. So I'm comparing what came out of the OCR scan to the names of fields that I think I'm looking for. Is that correct?
If I understand your question correctly, so are you talking about like here, the output? So
yes.
Usually from our model validation, right, the policy features, key policy features will be used as the model input. For example, the policy terms, 20 years, the reserve for 20 years term life will be different from the 15 years. So I will use the feature name as the join fields, and then join kind of the model input value, which is, do I have the, let's use the elimination theory, right? Elimination theory is the policy feature name. It's existing in both model input and the PDF contracts. And then I extract the 60 days from the PDF contract. That's the original source. And then the third column, I didn't show another kind of screenshot here. So the 60 days from the third column is from the second synthetic data that I created, which is mimicking the model input for my actual models.
I think the part that I'm getting the most tripped up on, and I might need to ask you offline so as not to hold up all of the nice people, is how your model knows that it has found the field by the name that you wanted it to look for. So just as a for instance, I mean, date of birth might be spelled differently, capitalized, not capitalized. Or fields might appear in a different order than, like in one scanned loan document or one scanned insurance policy than another. I'm I'm still not entirely clear on how your process figures out where it has found the answer to the question that it was looking for.
I see. So, this one is for demonstration purpose. So I make a very easy case for myself. So I just include exactly the same policy feature fields from the two synthetic data that I want to compare. But in reality, right, for example, for my actuarial model validation, I'm very familiar which field or policy features we need to use for term life. And then maybe a different list of policy features we'll use for whole life, for UL or annuity So I didn't make my demonstration that complex or difficult for myself, but in reality, the situation is more complex. For example, as I mentioned, when we validate different products, right? We have like 3 different type of like policy contracts, and then sometimes we have to eyeball or search. It depends on if the PDF is searchable or not searchable. But if it's 20 years ago, like issued like policy, we have to spend some human review time to do that. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I like to stand, and I have a cold, so bear with me. This is a different way than what I've been doing. So I've been able to read in PDF files into VIA as PDF files. And then I use Perl within the code, whatever it's called, the code, I can't think of it right now, but the little code piece. And I clean the data coming off the PDF. And with that, I can identify if I'm looking for a specific field, I can have the my Perl within the code part look for that title. So for your example, I could have it look for like a term, like the policy term, if that's the key word that I'm looking for. And then it would identify it, and it would mark that as that, and then it would output it. For what I'm doing, mine is much simpler than what you're doing. I'm comparing rules that we have for our scheduled workforce in the PDF files that we have, and comparing them against a database where we do discipline. And we have about 8,000 rules, and I'm able to see if we have any new rules that have shown up, and see if we have any changes to the rules, or if we've taken off rules. So mine is much simpler, but another option to this, it's a lot harder coding because you're doing Perl. And if you've used Perl, there's a little bit of learning curve with that. It's a harder coding versus the way that you approached it. But you could definitely have your keywords for the different parts. You could have it as a table and have it look at it.
And then it will search for those keywords.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's another way to do that. So for example, if we want to review the SAS code, we can just list out like proc as a keyword, and then frequency or content or macro, macro and those keywords, and then the tool or Python or other tool can directly search those keywords or the rules that we provided, and then it can search those information if that's what you
Yes, it is taking a process that took 2 weeks and got it down to like 2 to 4 hours, depending on how dirty things are. So I can be like, hey, I stand behind this code, or I stand behind these results. So my name is Liz Tinch, and I'm gonna try to connect with you too. It's Tinch, and feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you.
so much.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. My question is, how did you do validation of the results for your test scenario, and what would that look like at scale?
So do you mind to explain your question a little bit? So how do I do the validation of the test scenario here?
Yep. Was it manual? So where did the from PDF column come from? Your
So-
rightmost column.
So here, from this like simple use case demo, right, kind of, yeah, if we go back here, so as you can see, the second step, I join, right, the two tables into one side by side. And then like what we do kind of traditionally in Excel, right, we compare the two columns about the policy values, policy feature values to define kind of if they match each other or not. So that's the first column is a matching indicator, and then the second and the third column are from the model input synthetic data. And then the last column is from the extracted information from PDF. So as you can see, for example, for row number 7, elimination period is an important policy feature because based on that one, we need to calculate a different like projection kind of a reserve based on the elimination period. So that's the way that I just compare the two values and then make sure they match. I don't know if this answers your question, but I have done a lot of like model validation or reconciliation and defect triage using kind of different technologies before. Yeah, if you want, we can have an offline discussion.